The stars above the galaxy of Caliph shimmered like scattered diamonds against an endless void. It was a place where countless species thrived, each carving out their own destiny among the cosmos. But for Lyra, tonight felt different, cold and unwelcoming. Her heart pounded as she stared through the cracked viewport of her escape pod, watching her home planet shrink into nothingness behind her. She had been exiled, cast out by those who once called themselves her people. Now she was alone, drifting toward an uncertain future. Lyra's slender frame trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of her seat. Her emerald green skin glowed faintly under the dim light of the console, a trait unique to her species, the Velari. Her large, luminous eyes scanned the controls, trying to make sense of what little remained functional after the violent jolt that sent her fleeing into space. The Council's verdict echoed in her mind. Traitor. They'd accused her of espionage, of leaking classified information to rival factions. But it wasn't true. Someone had framed her, a shadowy figure pulling strings from within the highest ranks of power. And now, with no allies left, Lyra was running blind. Her ship shuddered violently as alarms blared, snapping her back to reality. A red warning flashed across the screen. Critical malfunction detected. Manual override required. Panic surged through her veins. She wasn't trained for this kind of emergency. She was just a researcher, someone who spent most days buried in dusty archives, studying ancient technologies. Still, she couldn't give up, not when survival meant finding answers about why she'd been betrayed. With trembling hands, Lyra tapped commands into the console, attempting to stabilize the vessel. Sparks flew from one corner of the dashboard, forcing her to shield her face. The ship groaned ominously as its systems began failing one by one. Finally, with a deafening lurch, the engines cut out entirely, leaving her adrift in the silent embrace of space. For several agonizing moments, all she could do was stare at the blinking lights on the control panel, praying for some miracle to save her. And then it came, a faint signal emanating from somewhere nearby. At first, she thought it might be debris or another damaged craft floating aimlessly. But as the signal grew stronger, she realized it wasn't random noise. It carried a pattern, rhythmic and deliberate. It reminded her of something ancient. Her pulse quickened. Could it be? Was there life, or perhaps remnants of past life, out there? The podship lurched again, this time pulling sharply downward as if caught in an invisible current. Through the viewport, Lyra saw a pale blue orb looming closer. It was a planet, vast and swirling with clouds and oceans. Earth, that's what the humans called it, according to the fragments of data she'd studied. Primitive compared to many worlds, yet teeming with potential. If she survived the landing, maybe, just maybe, she could find refuge here. But survival wasn't guaranteed. The podship careened wildly as it entered Earth's atmosphere, flames licking at its hull. Lyra gripped the armrests so tightly her knuckles turned white. Heat seared through the thin walls of the craft, making her sweat despite the cooling system struggling to keep pace. Outside, the world spun in a blur of greens and blues until suddenly everything went black. When she opened her eyes again, the air smelled strange, earthy and damp, unlike anything she'd ever encountered before. Her body ached from the impact, but miraculously, she was alive. The podship lay embedded in soft soil surrounded by towering trees, whose leaves rustled gently in the breeze. Shafts of sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting the ground in golden patches. It was beautiful, almost serene. If not for the fact that she had no idea whether this new world would welcome her or see her as a threat. Climbing out of the wreckage proved challenging. Every movement sent sharp pains shooting through her limbs, but she forced herself to move. Survival depended on staying hidden. Using the last reserves of energy in her suit's camouflage system, she activated a holographic overlay that distorted her appearance, blending her green skin and glowing eyes into something less conspicuous. Then, clutching a small scanner salvaged from the wreckage, she ventured deeper into the forest. As night fell, The forest transformed. Strange sounds filled the air, hooting calls, rustling bushes, and distant howls that made her skin prickle. Lyra paused beside a stream to drink, her reflection rippling in the water. She barely recognized herself beneath the hologram. Exhaustion weighed heavily on her shoulders, but she couldn't afford to rest yet. Not when the scanner still buzzed faintly, picking up traces of the mysterious signal she'd detected earlier. Following the signal led her uphill through dense thickets and over rocky terrain. By dawn, she reached the edge of the forest, where civilization stretched out before her. Buildings rose in the distance, clustered together like metallic mushrooms. Lights blinked in windows, and vehicles hummed along paved roads. Humans, so many of them, living their lives completely unaware of the chaos brewing beyond their skies. For a moment, Lyra hesitated. These creatures were unpredictable, driven by emotions and instincts far removed from the logic-based society she'd grown up in. Would they help her, or would they turn her away, or worse? She didn't have much choice. Without supplies or shelter, she wouldn't last long out here. Taking a deep breath, she stepped forward, her resolve hardening. Little did she know, her arrival had already been noticed. Deep within the town, a young man named Theo sat at his computer, scrolling through grainy security footage captured near the outskirts of town. On the screen, a figure moved awkwardly between the trees, cloaked in shadows. Something about it seemed off. Intrigued, he zoomed in, squinting at the image. Whoever, or whatever, it was, it didn't belong here. And thus began an encounter that would change both their lives forever. The morning sun filtered through the gaps in the trees, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Lyra crouched behind a cluster of bushes, her heart racing as she observed the small town sprawled before her. It was unlike anything she'd ever seen. A patchwork of wooden houses, brick buildings, and winding roads dotted with strange metal carriages that moved without visible means of propulsion. The air buzzed faintly with activity, voices calling out to one another, children laughing, machines whirring softly. Lyra's stomach tightened with hunger. She hadn't eaten since leaving Calith, and her energy reserves were dwindling fast. Her suit's holographic camouflage flickered intermittently now, its power nearly depleted. She needed food, shelter, and time to think. But venturing into this unfamiliar settlement felt like stepping into uncharted territory. Humans might look harmless compared to some of the predatory species she'd studied, but appearances could be deceiving. Taking a deep breath, she stepped cautiously onto the edge of the road leading into town. Her movements were deliberate yet awkward. Every step reminded her how alien this world truly was. The ground beneath her feet wasn't smooth or metallic like back home. It was uneven, covered in dirt and bits of gravel that crunched underfoot. As she walked, she muttered fragments of human language to herself, piecing together phrases she'd picked up from intercepted transmissions. Hello, please. Help. She reached the first row of houses, their windows glowing warmly in the sunlight. A group of humans stood nearby, chatting animatedly. One of them noticed her approaching and frowned. Lyra froze, unsure whether to retreat or press forward. Summoning what little courage she had left, she raised a hand hesitantly and said, hello. The human tilted his head, clearly puzzled. He exchanged glances with his companions before shrugging and walking away. Relief washed over Lyra, though it was short-lived. Another figure, a teenage boy with tousled brown hair and curious eyes, was watching her intently. His gaze lingered longer than anyone else's had, and for a moment, Lyra feared he'd see through her disguise. Instead, the boy smiled slightly and took a step closer. You lost? He asked, his voice friendly despite the suspicion lurking in his tone. Lyra blinked rapidly, caught off guard by his directness. She nodded slowly, careful not to reveal too much. Yes, lost, she echoed, stumbling over the words. The boy chuckled lightly. Well, you're definitely not from around here. He gestured toward the town center. Come on, I'll show you where you can grab something to eat. For a split second, Lyra debated refusing his offer. Trusting strangers was dangerous, especially when she didn't fully understand their customs or intentions. But her growling stomach made the decision for her. With a hesitant nod, she followed him down the street, keeping her head low to avoid drawing attention. As they walked, the boy introduced himself as Theo. He spoke casually about the town, pointing out landmarks and explaining local quirks. Lyra listened intently, absorbing every detail. Despite his casual demeanor, she sensed a sharp intelligence behind his words, an intuition sharper than most humans seemed capable of. When they reached a small cafe, Theo ordered 2 sandwiches and slid one across the table to her. "Thanks," Lyra murmured, unwrapping the food carefully. The bread smelled strange but appetizing, and she took a cautious bite. The flavors exploded in her mouth, sweet, savory, tangy, all at once. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of comfort. "So," Theo began after a pause, leaning forward slightly, "where are you really from? And don't say around here. I know you're lying." Lyra stiffened, her fingers tightening around the sandwich. How had he guessed so quickly? Most humans weren't observant enough to notice inconsistencies in behavior or appearance. Yet Theo's piercing gaze suggested otherwise. She hesitated, weighing her options. If she told him the truth, would he believe her? Or would he panic and turn her over to authorities? Still, she couldn't keep pretending forever. Lowering her voice, she whispered, "Not human." Theo raised an eyebrow, but didn't seem surprised. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Figured as much. Your accent is weird, and you walk kinda funny. Plus, no one around here dresses like that." He gestured vaguely at her suit, which shimmered faintly even beneath the camouflage overlay. Lyra sighed, realizing there was no point hiding anymore. Slowly, she deactivated the hologram, revealing her true form: emerald green skin, wide luminous eyes, and delicate features that marked her as unmistakably alien. To her relief, Theo didn't scream or run away. Instead, his curiosity only deepened. "Wow," he breathed, staring openly. "Okay, yeah, I wasn't expecting that. But hey, cool outfit. What brings you to Earth?" Despite herself, Lyra managed a small smile. There was something disarmingly genuine about Theo's reaction. No fear, no hostility, just pure fascination. Over the next hour, she shared fragments of her story, careful to omit sensitive details about her people's technology or the reason for her exile. She explained how she crash-landed in the forest and was searching for supplies while trying to stay hidden. To her surprise, Theo didn't dismiss her tale outright. Instead, he listened intently, asking thoughtful questions and offering suggestions. By the end of their conversation, he convinced her to let him help. "If someone's after you, we need to figure out why," he said firmly. "And if there's anything weird going on in this town, I'm probably the best person to find out." Over the next few days, Theo became Lyra's unofficial guide to Earth. He taught her basic human etiquette, helped her blend in better using borrowed clothes, and even introduced her to other townsfolk under the guise of being a distant relative visiting from abroad. While Lyra remained wary of getting too close to anyone else, she found herself growing fond of Theo's easygoing nature and quick wit. Their bond deepened further when Theo stumbled upon the same mysterious signal Lyra had been tracking. Late one evening, as they wandered through the woods near the crash site, his phone buzzed loudly. Frowning, he pulled it out and stared at the screen. "What the heck is this?" he muttered, showing Lyra the strange interference pattern displayed on the device. Lyra's breath hitched. The signal was stronger here, pulsing steadily like a heartbeat. She knelt beside a cluster of rocks and began digging frantically, uncovering a metallic object half buried in the soil. It was small, roughly the size of her palm, and etched with intricate symbols that glowed faintly in response to her touch. This belongs to my people," she whispered, awe creeping into her voice. "It must have been left here centuries ago. But why?" Theo squatted beside her, examining the artifact closely. "Looks old," he remarked. "Like really old. You think your ancestors visited Earth before?" "It's possible," Lyra admitted. "But if they did, why didn't anyone record it? Why leave something like this behind?" Before either of them could speculate further, a rustling sound came from the trees. They both turned sharply, hearts pounding. A pair of headlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the clearing. A black van rolled to a stop nearby, and several men dressed in dark uniforms stepped out, scanning the area with flashlights. "Who are they?" Theo whispered urgently, pulling Lyra back into the shadows. "I don't know," she replied, her voice trembling. "But they're not here for a picnic." As the men approached, Lyra realized her time in hiding was running out. Whoever these strangers were, they weren't ordinary humans, and they were dangerously close to discovering her secret. The headlights from the black van sliced through the darkness, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Lyra's heart raced as she pressed herself against a tree trunk, her glowing eyes flickering nervously toward Theo. He crouched beside her, his face pale but determined. The men in uniforms moved methodically, their flashlights sweeping over the area where Lyra had just unearthed the mysterious artifact. They weren't speaking loudly enough for her to hear clearly, but their movements suggested they knew exactly what, or who, they were looking for. "We need to get out of here," Theo whispered urgently, tugging at her sleeve. "If the I find us." Lyra nodded, though her mind was racing. She couldn't leave the artifact behind. It was too important. It wasn't just a relic of her people. It might hold answers about why she'd been exiled and how Earth fit into the larger puzzle of galactic history. But taking it now would mean revealing themselves, and that could put both her and Theo in grave danger. Before she could decide, one of the men shouted something unintelligible. Another beam of light swept past them, narrowly missing their hiding spot. Lyra clenched her fists, torn between fight and flight. Finally, with a silent nod to Theo, she slipped the small metallic object into her pocket and whispered, "Follow me." They crept deeper into the woods, moving as quietly as possible. Behind them, the voices grew louder, more agitated. The men had discovered the disturbed soil where the artifact had been buried, and it wouldn't take long for them to realize someone had beaten them to it. Branches snapped underfoot as they ran, adrenaline fueling their escape. Lyra's suit, still partially powered by its dwindling energy reserves, helped mask her presence, but Theo had no such protection. Every step he took felt like a betrayal of their position. After several tense minutes, they reached the edge of the forest, where an old chain-link fence marked the boundary of an abandoned military base. Rust coated the metal links, and warning signs hung crookedly on posts, faded with age. Lyra hesitated, scanning the area for any sign of movement. "This place looks deserted," she murmured. "Maybe we can lose them inside." Theo frowned, glancing back toward the forest. The distant glow of flashlights was still visible, growing closer. "Deserted or not, sneaking into a military base doesn't sound like a great idea," he said. "It's our best chance," Lyra countered firmly. "Besides, this signal I've been tracking, it's stronger here. Whatever these men are after, it's connected to this place." With no other options, Theo reluctantly followed her as they scaled the fence and slipped onto the property. The air inside the compound was heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional creak of rusted machinery swaying in the wind. Overgrown weeds choked the cracked pavement, and buildings loomed like skeletal remains of a forgotten era. Despite its decay, there was an undeniable aura of mystery about the place, as if secrets lay buried beneath layers of time and neglect. They made their way cautiously toward the largest structure, a warehouse-like building with boarded-up windows and a sagging roof. As they approached, Lyra noticed faint scorch marks on the walls, evidence of some kind of explosion or conflict long past. Pushing open a rusted side door, they stepped inside. The interior was dimly lit by shafts of moonlight filtering through gaps in the ceiling. Dust motes floated lazily in the air, and the smell of mildew filled their nostrils. But amidst the decay, something gleamed faintly, a series of metallic panels embedded in the far wall. Lyra's breath caught as she recognized the same etched symbols that adorned the artifact in her pocket. "This is it," she whispered, hurrying forward. Her fingers traced the intricate carvings, marveling at their craftsmanship. These weren't just random designs. They formed part of a complex system, likely designed to interface with advanced technology. Kneeling down, she examined the base of the panel, discovering a hidden compartment. Inside, she found another device, slightly larger than the first and humming softly with latent energy. "What does it do?" Theo asked, peering over her shoulder. "I'm not sure yet," Lyra admitted, "but it's definitely Valari tech. My ancestors must have left it here during some kind of expedition." As she studied the device, her scanner buzzed insistently, detecting residual traces of recent activity. Someone else had tampered with this equipment. And recently. Whoever it was hadn't come alone either. Footprints crisscrossed the dusty floor, leading to a set of stairs descending into the basement. "Let's check it out," Theo suggested, already heading toward the staircase. Lyra hesitated, unease prickling at the edges of her thoughts. This place was dangerous, not just because of the unknown intruders, but because of what else might be lurking below. Still, curiosity outweighed caution. With a deep breath, she followed him down. The basement was colder, darker, and smelled faintly of ozone. Flickering fluorescent lights illuminated rows of shelves stacked high with crates and boxes. Most appeared untouched, covered in decades' worth of dust. But near the center of the room, several crates had been pried open, their contents spilled across the floor. Among the debris, Lyra spotted fragments of alien circuitry and shattered components bearing familiar markings. "These aren't just relics," she muttered, picking up a piece of twisted metal. "Someone's been experimenting with this stuff." "Who would do that?" Theo wondered aloud, frowning. "And why keep it all hidden down here?" Before Lyra could respond, a soft click echoed through the room. Both froze, turning slowly toward the source of the sound. At the far end of the basement, a figure emerged from the shadows. A man dressed in a dark suit, holding a small device that emitted a low hum. His expression was calm but calculating, his gaze locked onto Lyra. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice smooth and devoid of emotion. "Especially not you, Lyra." Her blood ran cold. How did he know her name? And worse, what did he want with her? Theo stepped protectively in front of her, glaring at the stranger. "Who are you?" he demanded. The man ignored him, focusing solely on Lyra. "Your exile wasn't random," he continued, advancing slowly. "It was orchestrated to keep you away from this." He gestured toward the scattered artifacts. "And now you've walked right into our trap." Lyra's mind raced. Trap? What did he mean? Before she could ask, the device in his hand emitted a sharp pulse of energy, sending a wave of static rippling through the air. Her suit's systems faltered, the holographic camouflage failing completely. She stood exposed, her green skin glowing faintly in the dim light. Theo grabbed her arm, pulling her back. "We need to go. Now." "No," the man barked, raising the device again. "She stays." Without hesitation, Lyra activated the artifact in her pocket. Its glow intensified, emitting a high-pitched whine that seemed to disrupt the man's device. Sparks flew from his gadget as it shorted out, giving them a brief window to escape. Grabbing Theo's hand, she bolted for the stairs, the man shouting curses behind them. Back outside, they didn't stop running until they reached the relative safety of the forest. Panting heavily, Lyra leaned against a tree, clutching the artifact tightly. "That was close," she gasped. "Close?" Theo echoed incredulously. "That guy knew your name, Lyra. Who was he?" She shook her head, dread pooling in her stomach. "I don't know, but whoever he works for, they're involved in my exile. And they'll stop at nothing to get what they want." The forest was eerily silent as Lyra and Theo stumbled through the underbrush, their breaths coming in ragged gasps. The adrenaline from their narrow escape had begun to wear off, leaving behind a gnawing sense of unease. Lyra clutched the artifact tightly in her hand, its faint hum buzzing against her palm like a heartbeat. She couldn't shake the image of the man in the suit, his cold eyes, his deliberate tone, the way he'd known her name. It wasn't just coincidence. Someone had been watching her for a long time. As they reached a clearing, Theo finally slowed down, leaning against a tree to catch his breath. "Okay," he said between pants. "We need to talk about what just happened." Lyra nodded, her glowing eyes scanning the shadows nervously. "That man, he works for whoever framed me. They'd been using Earth's connection to my people's past for something dangerous." "But why Earth?" Theo asked, frowning. "Out of all the planets in the universe, why would your ancestors leave tech here?" "It's not just here," Lyra replied, her voice tinged with frustration. "This planet has always been special. My species once believed it held untapped potential, not just resources, but knowledge. Ancient texts hinted that Earth might serve as a bridge between civilizations." She paused, glancing at the artifact in her hand. "If someone is experimenting with Vaylari technology here, they're trying to unlock that potential. And if they succeed..." Her words trailed off, but Theo didn't need her to finish. He understood the implications well enough. Whoever these people were, they weren't playing games. They wanted power, and they'd stop at nothing to get it. Over the next few days, Lyra and Theo worked tirelessly to piece together more information. Using Theo's laptop, they scoured online forums and government databases for any mention of alien activity or unexplained phenomena tied to the abandoned military base. What they found was unsettling. Reports of strange lights in the sky, livestock mutilations, and even rumors of secret experiments conducted decades ago. None of it proved conclusive, but it painted a picture of something far bigger than either of them had imagined. Meanwhile, Lyra continued studying the artifact. Its intricate carvings glowed brighter when she touched it, responding to her presence like an old friend recognizing a familiar face. Slowly, she began deciphering its purpose. It wasn't just a relic. It was a key, designed to interface with other pieces of Vaylari technology scattered across Earth. If activated correctly, it could unlock hidden archives containing centuries' worth of data. But activating it came with risks. Every time she powered it up, it emitted a faint signal, a beacon that could draw unwanted attention. And sure enough, within hours of testing it one night, strange things started happening. Unmarked vans appeared on the outskirts of town. Men in dark suits loitered near public places, pretending to blend in but failing miserably. Even the skies seemed different, filled with an unusual number of airplanes circling overhead. "They know we're onto something," Theo muttered grimly as they huddled in his attic hideout. "What do we do now?" Lyra stared at the artifact, her mind racing. "We can't keep running forever. We need answers, and fast." Their opportunity came sooner than expected. One evening, while monitoring local news broadcasts, Theo noticed a report about increased UFO sightings near the same military base they'd explored. Witnesses claimed to have seen ships descending into the area, though authorities dismissed the claims as hoaxes or weather anomalies. Lyra immediately recognized the significance. "It's a rendezvous point," she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "Whoever framed me is meeting with others, probably representatives from rival factions who want access to the artifacts. If we can intercept them..." "You mean spy on them?" Theo interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "That sounds insanely risky." "It is risky," Lyra admitted. "But it's also our best chance to expose the truth. If I can confront the person behind this, maybe I can prove my innocence and stop whatever they're planning." After much deliberation, they decided to act. Armed with makeshift tools and determination, they snuck back to the military base under cover of darkness. This time, the compound buzzed with activity, vehicles parked haphazardly, armed guards patrolling the perimeter and equipment being hastily assembled around the main building. The air crackled with anticipation. Hiding behind a stack of crates, Lyra and Theo observed the scene carefully. A group of men gathered near the entrance, speaking in low tones. Among them stood the man in the suit, the one who'd confronted Lyra in the basement. He gestured toward the open doors, where several large crates were being wheeled inside. Inside those crates, pieces of alien tech, gleaming faintly in the dim light. "That's it," Lyra whispered, her fingers tightening around the artifact. "They're combining everything they've collected." Before she could move, however, another figure emerged from the shadows. A woman clad in sleek armor adorned with insignias Lyra recognized all too well. Commander Vale, her former mentor. The betrayal hit her like a punch to the gut. "Vale," she breathed, her voice barely audible. "She's the one who exiled you?" Theo asked, his tone sharp with disbelief. Lyra nodded, rage bubbling beneath the surface. "She framed me to cover her tracks. She must have known about Earth's importance all along, and she used me as a scapegoat." For a moment, Lyra considered confronting Vale directly. But before she could act, Theo grabbed her arm, pulling her back into hiding. "Not yet," he urged. "You're outnumbered. Wait for the right moment." Reluctantly, Lyra agreed. As they watched, Vale addressed the assembled crowd, her voice commanding yet chilling. "Earth will be ours," she declared. "Its secrets will tip the balance of power in our favor. Anyone who stands in our way will be eliminated." The weight of her words sank in. This wasn't just about Lyra anymore. It was about protecting Earth and ensuring its future remained free from exploitation. Suddenly, Theo accidentally knocked over a loose tool, sending it clattering to the ground. Heads turned instantly, weapons drawn. Panic surged through Lyra as she realized they'd been spotted. Grabbing Theo's hand, she bolted for the exit, Vale's voice echoing behind them. "Stop them." Dodging gunfire and narrowly avoiding capture, they made it back to the safety of the woods. Collapsing against a tree, Theo panted heavily. Well, that went well. Despite the chaos, Lyra managed a wry smile. "We got what we came for," she said, holding up the artifact. "Now we fight back." The news spread like wildfire. By morning, the entire world seemed to be talking about it. Strange lights in the sky, unexplained phenomena, and whispers of alien visitors. Lyra watched from Theo's attic window as helicopters circled overhead, their blades slicing through the crisp autumn air. Reporters crowded the streets below, microphones thrust toward anyone willing to share theories or half-truths. It was chaos, but also an opportunity. For days, Lyra had debated whether to step forward and reveal herself. Doing so meant risking everything, not just her own safety, but Earth's fragile peace. Yet staying hidden felt equally dangerous. If humanity learned about extraterrestrial life from someone else, from Commander Vale or her shadowy allies, they'd likely react with fear and hostility. Lyra knew this firsthand. She'd seen civilizations crumble under similar circumstances. But if she could frame the narrative, if she could show humans that not all aliens were threats, it might change the outcome. "Theo," she said softly, turning away from the window. "I need to tell them." Theo looked up sharply, his laptop balanced precariously on his knees. "Are you sure? Once you go public, there's no going back." "I know," Lyra replied, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "But we don't have a choice anymore. They're coming. For me, for Earth, for everything. If I don't speak now, they'll paint us however they want. Fear will win." After a moment of silence, Theo nodded reluctantly. "All right, but we do this together." They spent the next 24 hours preparing. Using Theo's computer skills, they hacked into local broadcasting systems, creating a live stream that would reach millions. Lyra rehearsed what she wanted to say, practicing phrases in simple English until they sounded natural. She didn't sugarcoat the truth. Instead, she focused on transparency, explaining who she was, why she'd come to Earth, and what was at stake. Her goal wasn't to inspire blind trust, but to foster understanding. When the time came, Lyra stood before the camera, her green skin glowing faintly under the dim light. Behind her, Theo adjusted the equipment nervously, ready to cut the feed at a moment's notice. Taking a deep breath, Lyra began. "My name is Lyra," she said, her voice calm yet firm. "I am not human. I come from a distant planet called Calith, home to my people, the Velari. Many of you may already suspect that we are not alone in the universe. What you don't know is how connected your world is to ours." She paused, letting her words sink in. On the monitor, comments flooded in, some skeptical, others curious. Lyra pressed on. "Earth holds secrets, ancient relics left behind by my ancestors during a time when our species sought to build bridges between worlds. These artifacts are powerful tools, capable of unlocking untapped potential. Unfortunately, they've also attracted those who seek to exploit them for selfish gain." Her gaze hardened as she continued. "I was exiled from my homeworld because I tried to uncover the truth. Powerful factions within my government feared exposure of their corruption, and they used me as a pawn. Now, these same individuals are here, preparing to claim Earth's resources without regard for its people. This is not just my fight. It is yours too." As she spoke, images flashed across the screen. Scans of the artifact, footage of the abandoned military base, even grainy photos of the mysterious ships spotted near town. Lyra ended her message with a plea. "You have a choice. You can let fear divide you, or you can choose unity. Together, we can protect Earth and ensure its future remains bright." The response was immediate and overwhelming. Social media erupted with reactions ranging from awe to outrage. Some praised Lyra's bravery, calling her a hero. Others accused her of manipulation, demanding proof of her claims. Governments scrambled to respond, issuing statements urging calm while secretly mobilizing forces. Amidst the noise, one thing became clear: humanity was divided. In the days that followed, Lyra and Theo found themselves thrust into the spotlight. Journalists camped outside Theo's house, desperate for interviews. Conspiracy theorists dissected every word Lyra had said, searching for hidden meanings. And then there were the believers, young activists inspired by her message, organizing rallies and spreading awareness online. One group, calling themselves The Bridge, took particular interest in Lyra's story, offering support and resources. Through it all, Theo remained steadfast by her side. He helped field questions, manage logistics, and shield Lyra from those who wished her harm. But even he couldn't shield her from the emotional toll of being scrutinized by billions. Late at night, when the cameras stopped rolling and the crowds dispersed, Lyra often sat alone in the attic, staring at the artifact in her hands. "Do you think it's enough?" she asked Theo one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "It has to be," he replied, sitting beside her. "You gave them hope, Lyra. That's more than most people ever get." Hope, however, wasn't enough to stop the invaders. As predicted, ships began descending from orbit, not just from Calith, but from other hostile races drawn by the signal emitted during Lyra's broadcast. Skirmishes broke out around the globe, forcing humanity to confront its place in the cosmos sooner than anyone expected. Back in town, Theo made a startling discovery while digging through old family records. His late grandfather, a retired engineer, had worked on classified projects involving alien tech decades ago. Hidden among dusty files was a blueprint detailing how to harness energy from Velari artifacts. The implications were staggering. Humanity had interacted with extraterrestrial technology long before Lyra's arrival, and perhaps even collaborated with her ancestors. "This changes everything," Theo said, showing Lyra the documents. "If we can replicate this process, we might stand a chance against them." Lyra studied the blueprints carefully, her mind racing. "It's risky," she admitted, "but if it works..." It gives humanity a fighting chance. Theo finished. With renewed determination, they set to work. Using the recovered artifacts and Theo's grandfather's designs, they built rudimentary devices capable of channeling alien energy. It wasn't perfect, far from it, but it was something. Something tangible, something that could tip the scales in their favor. As tensions escalated, Lyra faced another challenge, reconciling her loyalty to her own people with her growing attachment to Earth. When Commander Vale issued a final ultimatum, surrender the artifacts or face annihilation, Lyra knew she couldn't comply. Not anymore. Earth wasn't just a refuge, it was home. And she would defend it, no matter the cost. Standing atop a hill overlooking the town, Lyra gazed at the stars twinkling above. For the first time, she felt a flicker of pride, not just for her species, but for humanity. Imperfect, flawed, yet resilient. Together, they might just have a shot at rewriting destiny, or die trying. The air crackled with tension as Lyra and Theo stood on the outskirts of town, watching the skies darken with ominous shades. Ships from Caliph, and other factions they couldn't identify, hovered menacingly overhead, their metallic hulls glinting in the fading sunlight. The once quiet streets were now filled with panicked voices, people scrambling to evacuate or fortify their homes. Earth wasn't ready for this kind of war, but time had run out. Lyra tightened her grip on the makeshift weapon she'd helped create, a crude device powered by Valeri energy, capable of emitting bursts of destabilizing waves. It wasn't much compared to the advanced weaponry aboard the alien ships, but it was all they had. Beside her, Theo adjusted his backpack, which contained more blueprints and tools scavenged from his grandfather's old workshop. They weren't soldiers. They were survivors, fighting not just for themselves, but for humanity's future. We can't let them take the base, Theo said firmly, breaking the silence. If they get their hands on the artifacts there, they'll have everything they need to control Earth. Lyra finished grimly. Her heart ached at the thought of what might happen next, but she pushed aside her fear. There was no room for hesitation now. Turning to Theo, she added, "We'll hold them off as long as we can. But if things go south..." "Don't say that," Theo interrupted sharply, his voice tinged with frustration. "You're not giving up, not after everything you've done." Lyra managed a small smile despite the weight pressing down on her chest. "I'm not giving up. I'm just preparing." Before either of them could say more, a deafening roar shattered the moment. A massive ship descended from the sky, its engines kicking up clouds of dust and debris. From its belly emerged dozens of armored figures, armed to the teeth and moving with precision toward the abandoned military base. Lyra recognized the insignia emblazoned on their suits. It was Commander Vale's faction, leading the charge. "They're here," Lyra whispered, her glowing eyes narrowing. She turned to Theo. "We need to move. Now." The plan was risky, bordering on reckless. Lyra and Theo joined forces with a ragtag group of allies, local townsfolk who refused to flee, rogue scientists eager to fight back, and even a few skeptical soldiers who'd seen enough evidence to believe Lyra's warnings. Together, they devised ingenious traps using the alien artifacts and Theo's grandfather's designs. Energy barriers blocked key entry points, while modified devices created illusions of reinforcements, confusing the invaders. As night fell, the battle began. Lyra led the charge, darting between cover as beams of light zipped past her head. The makeshift weapons worked better than expected, disrupting enemy communications and disabling smaller drones. But the sheer number of attackers made progress slow and costly. Explosions rocked the ground, sending shockwaves through the forest. Trees toppled like matchsticks, and smoke filled the air, choking everyone caught in its wake. Through it all, Lyra stayed focused, her every movement calculated. She spotted Commander Vale near the center of the chaos, directing her troops with cold efficiency. Anger surged within Lyra, but she forced herself to remain calm. This wasn't about revenge. It was about survival. "Lyra!" Theo shouted, pulling her behind a fallen tree as another blast tore through the area. "We can't keep this up forever." "I know," she replied, gritting her teeth. "But we don't have to win. We just have to buy enough time for reinforcements." Her words were met with skepticism. Reinforcements? Who could possibly come to their aid in time? Yet deep down, Lyra held on to hope. Humanity wasn't alone in this fight. If she could inspire others to stand against tyranny, maybe, just maybe, they'd find allies among the stars. Amidst the chaos, Lyra found herself face to face with Commander Vale. The confrontation happened so suddenly that neither had time to react. One moment, Lyra was dodging blasts near the entrance of the base. The next, Vale stepped into view, her armor gleaming ominously in the firelight. "So predictable," Vale sneered, raising her weapon. "Did you really think you could stop me?" Lyra stood her ground, clutching her device tightly. "I didn't come here to stop you. I came here to stop them. The ones pulling your strings. You framed me, betrayed our people, all for power. Does it feel worth it, Vale, knowing you sold out your own species for greed?" For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered across Vale's face. Then it vanished, replaced by anger. "You know nothing," she spat. "This is bigger than loyalty, bigger than morality. Earth's secrets will reshape the galaxy, and I intend to be at the forefront." With that, Vale fired. Lyra barely dodged, the shot grazing her arm. Pain seared through her body, but she refused to falter. Activating her device, she unleashed a pulse of energy that sent Vale stumbling backward. Sparks flew from her suit as systems short-circuited, leaving her momentarily vulnerable. "You still don't understand," Lyra said, stepping closer. "Power isn't strength. True strength comes from unity, from protecting those who can't protect themselves. That's why I won't let you win." Vale snarled, lunging forward. For several tense moments, the two clashed, each determined to outlast the other. Finally, Lyra gained the upper hand, knocking Vale's weapon from her grasp. Instead of finishing her off, however, Lyra offered a hand. "It doesn't have to end like this. Help me stop this madness." For a heartbeat, Vale hesitated. Then, with a bitter laugh, she shook her head. "You always were naive." Before Lyra could respond, Vale activated a hidden mechanism on her wrist, triggering a self-destruct sequence. Alarms blared as the base began collapsing around them. "Run," Lyra shouted, grabbing Theo's arm as they sprinted for safety. Behind them, explosions lit up the night sky, consuming the artifacts, and Vale with them. When the dust settled, Lyra and Theo emerged battered but alive. The invaders had retreated, their forces weakened by the loss of the base. Though victory felt hollow, it was a start. Humanity had proven it wouldn't bow to fear or oppression. As dawn broke over the horizon, Lyra looked out at the damaged landscape, her resolve stronger than ever. Earth had chosen to fight back, and so would she. The sun rose slowly over the battered town, its golden rays casting long shadows across the scorched earth. Smoke still curled lazily into the sky from the ruins of the military base, a grim reminder of the battle that had raged through the night. Though the immediate threat was gone, the cost of survival weighed heavily on everyone who remained. Homes were destroyed, lives disrupted, and scars, both visible and invisible, etched deeply into the fabric of the community. Lyra stood at the edge of what had once been the forest, her emerald green skin catching the morning light as she gazed toward the horizon. Her body ached from exhaustion, and her arm throbbed where Vale's shot had grazed it. Yet physical pain paled in comparison to the emotional turmoil swirling inside her. She had fought for Earth, but now she faced an even harder truth. Staying here would only put humanity in greater danger. The invaders might have retreated, but they wouldn't stay away forever. And when they returned, Earth wouldn't be so lucky next time. Theo approached quietly, his footsteps crunching softly against the gravel beneath their feet. He carried 2 cups of steaming tea, offering one to Lyra without a word. She accepted it gratefully, wrapping her fingers around the warm mug. For a moment, neither spoke, content to simply share the quiet after the storm. "You're leaving, aren't you?" Theo finally asked, his voice low but steady. Lyra hesitated before nodding. "I have to," she admitted, her tone tinged with sadness. "If I stay, it'll just draw more attention to this planet. They'll keep coming. For me, for the artifacts, for whatever secrets they think Earth holds." "But you saved us," Theo protested, turning to face her fully. "You gave humanity a chance to stand up for itself. Doesn't that count for something?" "It does," Lyra replied softly. "But my presence here is a liability. Humanity isn't ready to join interstellar politics, not yet. Staying would only drag you into conflicts you're not prepared for." Theo sighed, running a hand through his tousled hair. "So what happens now? You just disappear, pretend none of this ever happened?" "No," Lyra said firmly, meeting his gaze. "This isn't goodbye forever. I'll keep fighting. For justice, for peace, for all the worlds caught in the crossfire. But Earth needs time to heal, to grow stronger. When the day comes that it's ready, I'll make sure it has allies waiting." Her word hung in the air, heavy with promise. Theo nodded slowly, though his expression remained conflicted. "Just don't forget about us, okay? About me." "I won't," Lyra assured him, managing a small smile. "How could I? You reminded me what it means to trust, to believe in something bigger than myself." She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Take care of this place, and yourself. Humanity has potential, Theo. More than you realize." With heartfelt farewells exchanged, Lyra made her way back to the remnants of her podship. Using parts scavenged from the wreckage and tools provided by Theo's makeshift workshop, she managed to repair enough of the vessel to ensure a safe departure. As she powered up the engines, townsfolk gathered nearby, watching silently as the ship hummed to life. Some clutched homemade signs bearing messages of gratitude. Others simply stood with tears in their eyes. Before ascending into the sky, Lyra addressed them one last time via holographic projection. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying clearly despite the distance. "You didn't ask for this fight, but you chose to stand your ground. That courage will define your future. Remember, Earth isn't alone. Somewhere out there, among the stars, are beings who want to build bridges instead of walls. Keep reaching for them. And never stop believing in yourselves." As the podship lifted off, cheers erupted from the crowd below. Lyra watched them shrink into tiny dots, her heart swelling with pride. Humanity wasn't perfect. It was messy, flawed, and unpredictable. But it had heart. And that made all the difference. High above the atmosphere, Lyra allowed herself a moment of reflection. The artifact she'd salvaged pulsed faintly in her hand, its glow softer now, almost comforting. It served as a reminder of her mission, not just to uncover truths, but to protect those too vulnerable to defend themselves. With renewed determination, she plotted a course for the nearest neutral spaceport, knowing full well that her journey was far from over. Yet even as she ventured deeper into the unknown, Lyra couldn't shake the feeling that Earth's role in the galaxy was only beginning. Back on the planet's surface, hidden beneath layers of soil and rock, another artifact stirred faintly. Its symbols glowed dimly, pulsing in rhythm with the stars above. Unseen and untouched, it waited patiently, for discovery, for activation, for the next chapter in humanity's story. And somewhere beyond the cosmos, forces both benevolent and malevolent observed the events unfolding on Earth. To some, it was a beacon of hope, to others, a challenge. But one thing was certain. Earth had proven itself worthy of notice. Whether as ally or adversary, its destiny was now intertwined with the fate of the universe. As Lyra's ship disappeared into the vast expanse of space, the camera lingered momentarily on the glowing artifact buried deep within the Earth. Then, with a final flicker, the screen faded to black.